Hello, my lovelies. I am Madame Crystal Butterfly, and today, my lovelies, we are going to be doing a different kind of video. You see, my lovelies, my latest book, Curse of the Frog Prince, Part 2, is coming out July 21st. And to celebrate this book's debut, I've decided to read to you all a few chapters from the very first Curse of the Frog Prince book. For today's video, I shall be reading from the first 2 chapters of my story. So, my lovelies, I suggest you sit back, relax. Actually, get your snacks first. Yeah, that's right. Get some snacks to enjoy while I read to you. Do you have your snacks? Good, good. Now, sit down, relax, my lovelies. Okay, everybody relaxed? Good. Now, please allow me to read to you the first chapter from my book, Curse of the Frog Prince, Part 1. The early morning sun shined brightly over the kingdom of Benweo as palm trees swayed from a strong morning breeze. Shadows from the trees danced over the edges of the nearby beach, granting it some desired shade from the hot morning sun. Famous for being the only beach on the continent that had pink sand, people from all over the world once filled the beaches of Benweo. At least that was the way things used to be. Now the beach was completely void of any human visitors. That was, except for one young woman who was standing near the shoreline. The woman's hands were rough, and her dark chocolate skin housed several scars beneath her clothing. She had an oval face that was delicately framed by long black hair styled into several individual braids. She stood stone-faced, both of her large hazelnut eyes staring straight ahead. It would seem almost a miracle to any observer that the strong morning breeze had not blown her into the sea. Her body, although muscular, was so thin that the light green dress that she was wearing hung on her like a sail on a boat. Her bare feet were covered with mud, sand, and debris from the forest floor. Looking down at them, she thought, I don't want him to see my feet this way. She walked to the edge of the shore and allowed the aquamarine sea water to wash over them, clearing away the debris from her feet. While cleaning her feet, she wondered why she was doing something so pointless. She would have to walk through the woods to get home. Still, she thought, what he thinks of me matters. Even my feet, speaking of him. He should have been here 10 minutes ago. I hope nothing bad happened to him. Her heart started to race, and she began pacing back and forth, splashing in the water. What if he was? No, don't think that way. He has been on more dangerous missions than this and made it out all right. Once he arrives, say what you need to say. Then don't talk for too long. After that, and head home. Home. That word feels funny, considering my home is now my hell. She noticed a blue shell underneath the water near her foot, stopped pacing, and knelt down to pick it up. After standing up, she started to examine the shell. How long has it been since I lost everything? Probably 2 months, or at least I think it's been that long. She decided the seawater had cleaned her feet as well as could be expected. She walked over to the spot on the beach where the palm trees provided shade. As she stood there, she felt a familiar pair of warm arms wrap around her. A male voice from behind said, I'm sorry I'm late, Akinyi. Akenyi did not pretend that being in the man's arms made her soul feel at ease, but as much as she wanted to remain in his embrace, she had to force herself to push his arms away. She backed away from him. As she did so, she took a breath to calm her nerves before turning to face him. Owusu, did you learn anything about my brother's whereabouts? Owusu replied, Akenyi, what is wrong? Nothing. Just tell me what I asked. If nothing is wrong, then why did you walk away from me? And why won't you look at me? Akenyi told herself to remain calm as she slowly raised her head and looked at Owusu in the eyes. Please, Owusu, just answer my question. Owusu was a young man with dark brown skin and a muscular build. He was the height of the average male. The curly, jet black hair covering the top of his head was styled in a temple fade with a sponge twist. His large brown eyes had a glimmer of kindness. He was wearing a white dashiki that had black embroidery around the neckline and sleeves. An old faded pair of black shorts covered the upper part of his muscular legs. His lower legs had several scars, the remains of old wounds. His feet were being protected by a pair of black leather sandals. Owusu looked at Akenyi as if he wanted to ask more questions about her behavior, but it was clear something inside him told him to wait. He answered, Sadly, I have not received any message about whether or not the prince is safe. However, I have not been given any reason not to believe he is all right. Why? If your brother had been killed or captured, the usurper would have made a huge spectacle of it. He would have used the information to solidify his rule as Nwaiyo's new king. After hearing this, Akenyi allowed herself to relax. You have a point. That tyrant would be dancing if my brother was dead. Anyway, I only have a little time left. Were you able to make contact with that old general? What was his name? Mobutu. Yes, I told him that Nwaiyo's princess would fully pardon him if he helped your family retake the kingdom. He told me he would think about it if he does not get a better offer. Meaning the bastard is hoping the usurper wants to make a deal with him. True, that greedy old man just wants riches and women. He thinks that he is so wise. However, we both know that the usurper will only offer him death if he does not swear loyalty. I guess it's at least good to know that Mobutu has not allied with the usurper. Anyway, I should get back before my jailers notice that I am gone. Please allow me to escort you back. No. Why? I have not seen you in over 2 months, and you are acting like you're not happy to be near me. Akenyi's heart began to pound, but she reminded herself that she must be strong. Say what you have to say and leave quickly. She took a breath before saying, Owusu, I am grateful for your help and all the information that you have shared with me. I realize the danger that I have placed you in, but we can no longer have a non-formal relationship. In other words, you want us to stop being lovers. It's not a matter of me wanting to stop being with you. I'm engaged and I can't be like my mother and have a husband and a lover. Owusu stared at Akenyi, his face filled with disbelief. Akenyi knew that his pride would not allow him to beg her or any woman for her affection, no matter how much he loved her. So he replied, I understand. Akenyi, once again lowering her face so as not to look Owusu in the eyes, stated, I'm glad you accept the situation. Akenyi, I never said I accept a damn thing about this, but sadly, we have bigger things outside of our relationship to worry about. When everything is finally over, let's sit down and talk about us." "There is nothing to talk about. Our romance is over," she said. "Goodbye." And as she started to walk past Owusu, he grabbed her hand, causing her to drop the shell. In response, she quickly pulled her hand away. In a disappointed voice, Owusu said, "Things are not over between us. I'll be here when you wake up." Akenyi refused to look at him as she whispered, "I already told you, it's over." She turned away from him and began quickly running toward the forest. Akenyi slowed her pace when she reached the edge of the beach. The princess began to think as she spotted the pathway that led through the dense forest. She was hurt that Owusu had not put up more of a fight to save their relationship. They had been lovers for almost 5 years. Was I just a trophy to him? Sex with the princess? No, he loved me. Well, my lovelies, what do you think of that first chapter? Pretty interesting, right? I bet you're all saying things like, "Madam Crystal Butterfly, why on earth are you trying to get us to analyze your book? But yet, why are you analyzing your book? We want to hear what happens next. So why don't we get going on the second chapter?" Then there was Tuma, her brother, the only member of her immediate family that she had left. Her eyes filled with tears as she remembered the last time she had seen him. They had stood in the center of the massive palace library. Tuma's right arm appeared to be seriously injured. When she questioned him about it, he put on a brave face, telling her, "No worries, it's just a scratch." The doctor insisted on bandaging it to prevent infection. He had returned to the palace to rescue her, informing her that Mwayo troops were in full retreat. King Ofori and his army would reach the capital soon. He wanted the two of them to lead what remained of their armed forces to seek sanctuary in their cousin Bonsu's kingdom of Yaboasi. She had refused to go with him, reminding Tuma King Ofori had proven to be a merciless killer in other kingdoms that he had defeated. If she stayed, she could use whatever influence that she had with King Ofori to protect the people of Nweo. He questioned her. "How do you think you alone can stop him? You will be completely at his mercy." Akenyi smiled. "You forget, brother. That fool of a man wants me to be his wife. I would rather slit my own throat, but as Princess of Nweo, I am willing to make the sacrifice if it will save our people." He tried again to convince her to leave. When yet again she refused, he told her that as they spoke, their troops were gathering as many of Nweo's citizens as they could for the journey to Yaboasi. With that said, Akenyi hugged her brother, feeling him flinch in pain. When he got to the door, he turned and looked at his sister for a moment. He raised his right fist in the air as he shouted, "The enemy may be strong." In response, the princess raised her right fist in the air while shouting in reply, "We are stronger." Then in unison they said, "Nweo will prevail." After that, he walked out, closing the door behind him. By the time Akenyi reached the edge of the forest, she was crying so hard she could barely see the side of the mountain. Akenyi had never felt so alone in her life. She chastised herself. "I must be strong." Considering how far away Tuma is, it should not surprise me that there is no news about him. Stop thinking. Just focus on getting back to your room before the guards notice that you're gone. The princess used her dress to wipe her face and blow her nose. She followed the mountainside until she finally reached a cave opening. When she entered the cave, she found the torch she had used earlier sitting in a bucket of water. She then picked up the bucket and walked a little back into the forest. Akenyi poured out the water, but decided to keep the torch and the bucket. Returning to the cave, she lit a new torch that she had left for herself earlier and walked deeper into the dark cave while still holding the bucket containing the old torch in one hand and the lit torch in the other. The light of the torch danced against the stone walls of the dark cave while the princess carefully navigated through the rocky pathway. The cave was dark and gloomy. Occasionally bats flew overhead. The cave floor was damp and her feet were covered in mud from the walkway. She thought, I wish I did not have to go this way to get back to my room, but it is the safest route. After wandering the cave for what felt like an hour, Akenyi's path was blocked by several small boulders. Propped against the boulders was a large ladder that had two large barrels next to it. She placed the lit torch in a small opening in the boulder. She then set the bucket with the old torch on the ground next to the barrels. One barrel was full of water, while the other had several unused torches. Hanging on the side of the barrel filled with water was a dipper. She reached for the dipper, filled it with water, and cleaned her feet. After she cleaned her feet, she washed her face, hoping to wash away the evidence of her tears she had shed earlier. She pulled the torch from the small hole where she had secured it. Holding the torch, she began climbing the ladder. After climbing several rungs, she dropped the torch into the barrel of water. Akenyi stood still while thinking, all right, it's time. As the torchlight was extinguished, she was plunged into total darkness. Akenyi closed her eyes. She said to herself, focus, use your sense of touch. One rung at a time, she climbed the ladder. Once she could feel she had reached the top of the ladder. She lifted her right hand to touch the ceiling above her, pushing against it. Eventually, the princess heard a small pop. Using both hands, she pushed up against the ceiling. Almost immediately, a small portion of the ceiling above her opened up. As she opened her eyes, she felt a sharp tingling from the bright light. She climbed out of the cave. Closing the cave entrance, she stood up and began dusting herself off. The princess entered a small rectangular space, not large enough to be called a room. It had red brick walls and a dirty floor. There was a large rectangular window to Akenyi's right, along with a staircase leading upward stood in front of her. When she finished dusting off, she quickly made her way up the stairs and slowly opened the door, which on the other side appeared to be an ordinary bookcase. Hearing no sounds and seeing no one, she entered the library, which was a massive room. The bright morning sunlight shone through the glass skylight at the top of the ceiling. The center of the room was empty, surrounded by imposing bookshelves that you would expect to see in such a large space. Akenyi raced across the room's white marble floors until she reached the other side. In the center of the other wall was a massive painting depicting a bird flying through the sky with his head facing backwards. Akenyi quickly pulled a small lever behind the painting, and next to the painting, part of the wall opened up like a small door, revealing her bedroom. She walked inside, closed the door, and stared around the large room. Sunlight from the double doors that led to her balcony reflected from the brown tile floor to the stone walls. The room had been her bedroom her whole life. Looking down at her feet, she realized how much dirt remained on them. She walked over to the nightstand next to her bed. There she picked up a white porcelain bowl containing a matching pitcher filled with water. She debated with herself whether to take the pitcher of water into her bathing room and put her feet into the copper tub and clean them there. She decided that she would sit on the sofa instead. She smiled for the first time in a long time while she sat the bowl on the floor next to her blue sofa. As she walked to retrieve a washcloth and towel from her dresser drawer, she remembered the guards and thought, I better go ahead and clean my feet before they get here. After using the towel to dry her feet and legs, she walked to the nightstand closest to the wall to retrieve a container of shea butter. As she sat down on the green spread that covered the top of her large wooded sleigh bed, she began to rub the shea butter onto her legs and feet. Her eyes caught the reflection of a small letter opener shaped like a sword. The sight of the letter opener took her mind back to the day King Ofori and his troops stormed the capital and took over the palace. The princess had made sure that she looked her most appealing. After taking what she hoped would be a relaxing bath, she sprayed her body from head to toe with her favorite perfume. She put on a long, form-fitting blue dress which allowed every curve of her body to show. Her braids were twisted into small curls. Her nails and lips were painted a lovely shade of red. The princess remembered admiring herself in the standing mirror in the corner of the bedroom. I look delicious. She then grabbed her letter opener from the top of her desk and walked to the throne room. She thought about how delicious she looked as she arrived in the throne room, gazing at her parents' thrones sitting side by side, while she wondered to herself how much time the former owners of those thrones had felt disdain at the presence of each other. After climbing the 6 wide steps that led to the small stage that elevated the thrones above the rest of the room, the princess sat on her father's throne where she waited for the arrival of King Ofori. Akenyi sat there for what felt like hours, occasionally standing and pacing around the room, never moving too far from her father's throne. Even now, I am grateful I was wise enough to have that letter opener with me. The princess felt a cold chill at the moment King Ofori, followed by his contingent of generals and soldiers, burst into the throne room. As they approached the throne, Akenyi stood so that the king could get the full view of what she was selling. She looked into his face. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. Then they revisited her breast and lips. She recalled thinking to herself, Phase 1 complete.
All right, my lovelies, that's it for this week's reading. If you wish to hear more of the story before I get to next week's reading, then I suggest you grab yourself a copy of Curse of the Frog Prince Part 1, currently available on Amazon. And don't forget, Curse of the Frog Prince Part 2 is coming July 21st, so it will be here before you know it. You don't want to miss out on that lovely story, I promise you. Now, if you've made it to this part of the video, first I would like to say thank you. And please give this video a like. Leave me a comment. And if you have not yet, slap the subscribe button like it owes you money. And don't forget to give that little notification bell a ring. And with that, my lovelies, this video is a wrap. Now if you please, come with me as we dance into a world